Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching Study IQ IAS English channel. Now in our today's video, we are going to discuss about Zo communities of Northeast. And why are we discussing about them? Because last week in a district in Manipur, Surachandpur, we saw violent clashes happening between three different communities. On one side, there were people belonging to Zomi community, and on the other, there were people belonging to Kuki and Hmar communities. Now, what is surprising to know that all these three communities belong to a larger umbrella of Zo people. So, the question might appear in your mind, who are these Zo people? Now, Zo people, these are a part of ethno-linguistic group who speak primarily Kuki-Chin languages. Now, Kuki-Chin language is a group of languages related to Sino-Tibetan languages. But back in 2018, a linguist known as Linda Connerth, she gave the term, instead of Kuki-Chin languages, she preferred to call them South Central Trans-Himalayan languages. And why was this connotation or the designation changed? Because of a negative connotation of the term Kuki-Chin for many of the speakers of the languages in this particular group. Now, the origin of these Kuki people. Now, although there is no universally accepted origin story, but there's a larger consensus on the fact that these Zo people settled in what is known as a today or present day Myanmar. And they settled in Myanmar thousands of years ago. And they traveled primarily from China via Tibet. Now, constant feud among the various tribes which constitute this broader Zo community, it drove many of these people westwards into modern day Mizoram and parts of Myanmar back in 17th century. Now, these people, they are settled in newer villages in now what is known as India, but their emotional and social attachment or enmeshment relates with the Chin tribes located in present day Myanmar. Now, today, majority of Zo people, they live in states of Manipur and Mizoram in northeast part of our country, whereas in Bangladesh, particularly in Chittagong Hills and in Chin state of Myanmar. So these people, they are spread currently across three countries, that is northeast part of India, in Bangladesh as well as in Myanmar. Now, what you have to understand that the unifying factors of these people, that primarily under the broader umbrella of Zo communities, there are as much as different sub-tribes and clans such as Chin, Kuki, Mizo, Lushe, Zomi, Paite, Hmar and other tribes also. But they're happening from different tribes, what is their unifying factor besides ethnicity? And that factor is called as religion. Because traditionally these Zo people, they were animists in nature who practiced ancestral worship. But in modern day time, due to proselytization activities by British missionaries from 19th century onwards, a majority of Zo people now, they follow the Protestant form of Christianism. So, besides ethnicity, their unifying factor remains the factor of religion. Now, why or what are the dynamics between these Zo group of people? Now, at the heart of clash which happened last week in Manipur, what you have to understand that there is a long past struggle going on within the various small tribes from the larger, broader umbrella of Zo communities, because they feel that once clubbed together in a broader ambit of Zo community, their unique identity stands to get diluted. Also, notably, these tribes, particularly belonging to Zomi tribe, they reject the term Kuki, pointing to the colonial origin of the term. And they feel that once they are assembled or assimilated into a broader umbrella, it is done through the hegemonic identity and it denies them the individual identity of their own tribes and communities. So, this unifying or clubbifying factors of these Zo people was the origin story of the last week clashes. But keeping these clashes aside, you have to understand that the idea of unifying these Zo people has found appeal among many different sections of society. Primarily, today Zo people, they straddle among various different geographical entities, be it different states in Indian Union and also across international boundaries, that is into Bangladesh and even Myanmar, that was erected rather arbitrarily by the British colonial government. And this is for administrative reason that even today they do not find themselves under one administrative unit. That the people, they are living across different geographies into various states and countries, and therefore there is no one administrative unit to govern them in their own entirety. And that is why the demand for a Zo unification finds appeal among many different sections of society. Now you have to understand that this appeal based on the ethnicity is something not very uncommon to the region of Northeast. Because you have to understand the current boundaries of Northeast India, which separated from the other regions in the neighboring areas, that is in present day Bangladesh and Myanmar. All of these boundaries were carved out at the time of British rule, which was a colonial rule. And the British government at that time, specifically back in 1826, they carved out these political boundaries without even seeking the opinion of the local people. So what happened that people belonging to same ethnicities, that is these Zo communities and even Nagas, they happen to be divided without even their consent and approval. So people with same ethnicity and culture may sometimes even found themselves living in different countries altogether. Now the current Indo-Myanmar border, it reflects the very boundary that the British colonial government drew. And sometimes people living in the region, they have very strong ethnic and familial ties even with people living across the country. For example, there's a village in Nagaland known as Longwa village in Mon district. Now this village is actually the village spreads across not just in India but also in Myanmar. Similarly, there are other villages also located in different parts of Northeast that extends even to Myanmar. So what about people living in that country? To facilitate the movement, although government has implemented free movement regime, but do you think is it enough? It isn't. Because people, they happen to find themselves living under different political rule, under different political systems, across different boundaries. And this actually is what has happened to the Northeast in general. Because similar demands have not just emerged from people belonging to Zoo communities, people even belonging to Naga tribes, they have demanded for a greater Nagalim region. And for their greater Nagalim to happen in current situation, you have to understand the land would be carved out not just from present day Nagaland, but it will also be taken from Meghalaya, from Assam, from Arunachal Pradesh, from Manipur, and also from the present day Myanmar. So what about the legibility of these demands? Is reunification possible? Now, in current circumstances, you have to understand the movement for reunification itself has petered out because of the political implausibility of such region being carved out from different Indian states and also from different countries like Myanmar and Bangladesh, because people belonging to Zo community, they not just live in Manipur, Tripura and Mizoram in India, but they also found themselves in states like Chin and Arakan state in Myanmar, as well as Chittagong Hills, which is located in Bangladesh. But this idea of reunification of Zo has found themselves quite politically charged movement in the states of Mizoram, because the principal opposition party in Mizoram, Zoram People's Movement, its leader Laldu Homa has actually said that the primary mission of his party is to reunify the Zo communities and put them under one administrative and political unit. Now the question remains, is forming of one political and administrative unit possible for such communities? Let us try to understand this in the context of Indian Constitution. Now you understand, as per Indian Constitution, India is an indestructible union of destructible states, which means anything or any demand which carves out or which demands for a separate country from India is something which is unconstitutional in nature. That means Indian government will consider this as a threat to national security and sovereignty of India and will crush down such movements. But when it comes to demand for a separate state within India, it is quite constitutional and also quite possible in nature because of Article 3 of the Indian Constitution. Because Article 3 of the Indian Constitution, it allows Indian Parliament to form new state, alter the areas, boundaries and even the names of existing states, and it includes for a permission from the President and also after seeking the opinion of a particular state legislature. So it is well within the power of Indian Parliament that it can provide for separation of an existing Indian state to carve out altogether a new state, and this can be done even by a simple amendment in the both houses of the Parliament. So if any demand emerges from such communities to carve out a separate state from themselves, although it might be quite politically difficult in nature, but it is not an illegal or an unconstitutional demand, because we have seen in the past, right at the time since India got independent, India's internal political boundaries have witnessed many change because of the ongoing demands from different regions. But there's also another option that you can carve out separate administrative units for these communities under 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution, as autonomous councils for tribal areas currently are present in the northeastern part of our country, specifically in states like Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura as well as Mizoram. So technically such zoo communities can also be put in different kind of administrative setups under the 6th schedule, where autonomous councils belonging to these different communities can be formed, and these autonomous councils will have legislative, judicial as well as regulatory power to regulate the subjects living under themselves. So technically, whenever a demand for such different areas or a different political and administrative unit rises in any part of our country, if that demand wants it to carve out a separate country from India, you understand that is a unconstitutional demand, and Indian government will consider such demand as a threat to Indian sovereignty and national security. But when such demand comes out to demand for a separate state in the Indian Union itself, that is a very constitutional and a legal demand, although it can be quite politically difficult. Because you understand, not just Zo community want a separate unit for themselves, but also other tribes living in the same region, that is Naga tribes, they are wanting to create a separate political territory for themselves. But you understand, if Government of India grants one of these communities a separate political entity or a separate state for them, similar demands might emerge as a form of domino effect. So therefore, it is the final decision of the government whether or not they will provide a separate administrative and a political unit to such communities, and will follow up if any demands or any development happen in that area.